Hello and welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. Today, my guest is Dallas Jones, who's worked in the industry for 28 years. Dallas began their career in 1994 as Vice President of Training, Sales, and Marketing at Radon Inc. and currently is the Vice President at EcoSense Inc. EcoSense wants to become a globally trusted provider of radon monitoring solutions, improving the quality of living and health for everyone. So I'm very curious, and I'm going to ask Dallas a lot of questions about radon gas and how it may or may not be helpful for you. If you'd like to get thicker, fuller, and stronger hair, then make sure to check out fullyvital.com. The team's come up with fantastic and natural products that help rejuvenate your hair, but also delay and reverse gray hairs. So if you're interested in better hair, go to fullyvital.com and use the code anti-aging-hacks for 15% off your order. Are you enjoying the shows on this channel? Then please make sure to hit the subscribe button down below so you can get notified when we release new episodes. Our goal with this show is to help you and give you practical tips that you can use to slow down and reverse your aging so you can live and feel younger and live your best life. With that said, let's get on with the show. So with that said, Dallas, welcome to the Anti-Aging Hack Show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, so in talking with you before the show, it looks like you've been in the radon industry for a very, very long time. I didn't even know radon was an industry to begin with. But please tell us about your experience with radon and all the things you've done in your career.
Well, the radon first became noticed as a possibility in a residence back in the mid-1980s when a worker at the Limerick nuclear power plant set off the alarms going into work, not coming out. And it was actually during construction, so they weren't even producing nuclear power at the time. And after doing that for a few days in a row, they decided they needed to investigate why he was contaminated. And they went to his home as part of that investigation and discovered he had incredibly high radon concentrations in his residence. And since that time, it has grown, yes, indeed, into an industry, primarily at the home inspection stage where you buy a home and people have it inspected for other things. And radon has become the #1 ancillary service for home inspectors over the past 30 years. And as people have learned about radon during home transactions, there's been more emphasis on public awareness, and people have been deciding that they need to test because they're concerned rather than because they're purchasing a home and hope to have the seller perhaps pay for any remediation if that's necessary. I've been involved in the business since the late 80s when EPA was still doing some research on how to mitigate radon in different buildings. And I've worked doing instrument manufacturing and as teaching and so forth. So actually, I worked for a while as the executive director of the industry association. And there's a certification program to make sure that people who do the work, both testing and mitigation, are qualified to do so.
Totally. Thank you. So you have a wealth of experience in this field. So you're an ideal guy to explain radon to the listeners, I guess. We've never had somebody to talk about radon on the show before. And in talking with you, I do remember I've bought a couple of homes in the past, and every time we did the inspections, there was that radon gas test, which again was fine, and I didn't even think about it because it checked the box and it was good to go. But why is that tested? And even before we get to why is that tested, where does radon gas come from, and is it safe or unsafe for humans?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, it's a radioactive gas. So right there, you can see that there's concern if you're exposed to radiation, particularly too much. It's a naturally occurring gas. It comes from the decay of radium and uranium, which is prevalent in most soils and rocks, at least to some degree. So the fact that the radium produces a gas, it can travel through the soil and into our homes. And every home is, for the most part, is connected to the ground in some fashion, and radon can be drawn into buildings through the tiniest cracks and crevices and holes in the slab and foundation. If it's coming up, outside, then it dilutes rapidly into the atmosphere, and while there's a little background radon concentration, outdoors it's pretty small, but indoors it can accumulate to enough of a concentration to be of concern. It's actually the leading cause of lung cancer in people who don't smoke. It's second only to cigarette smoking as far as lung cancer prevalence. So it is a big deal. Unfortunately, you can't see it, and you can't taste it, you can't smell it, and so we don't have any way to detect its presence unless we have a certain kind of detector, and so it's easy to dismiss.
Totally.
Along with the
Totally.
fact that the health risk, lung cancer is a it takes some time to develop. So it's not an acute risk that, you're not going to die in your sleep like you would with carbon monoxide poisoning, for example. But over time, that exposure causes lung cancer. And if you've ever been around someone with lung cancer, it's a terrible disease. And most of the time, it's not discovered until it's in late stages.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for painting the picture of radon and where it comes from. So then somebody could draw the conclusion that if you have less radium and less uranium in the soil in the state or the city that you live in, then you're on the safer side. Of course, you can do testing. But is that a fair assumption that geography matters?
That's a good question too. In our earlier conversation, you told me you're in Texas, and back in the very early '90s, the EPA put together a zone map where they ranked counties across the country into one of three zones. The zone one being the highest prevalence, they thought. Unfortunately, they didn't have a lot of radon test data to use. So one of the factors was based on the amount of radium and uranium in the soil, as well as some other factors. They put together an algorithm, if you will, to try to make a prediction from a lot of different factors, including, some radon tests. And Texas was one of those areas that showed, well, the risk was low, was in that zone 3. Since that time, there've been testing in Texas, and there are a lot of areas in Texas that have elevated concentrations indoors. And the only way to know is to test, is the real answer to your question. Elevated concentrations have been found in every state and really every county in the country.
Got it. Okay, so let's say that you're a homeowner and you're looking to buy a new place, and you have family and kids, you want to protect them even more so. So you're concerned about radon at this point, and you get the test done when you buy the home. Are you good to go, or is there more to be done here?
Well, one of the problems with real estate testing is due to the fact that you're limited in time. You've got a window of inspection, and so the tests are limited to a minimum of 2 days, but usually not much longer than 2 days. So over the course of a year or so, that's just a little snapshot of what the radon concentrations could be over time. Radon, unfortunately, doesn't stay the same all of the time. It fluctuates. It can fluctuate from morning until evening, from different seasons, from week to week with the weather, temperature differences. The reason it's drawn into buildings is pressure related. There's usually a lower pressure indoors than there is in the soil air, below. So air will travel from a high to a lower pressure. So it's being almost sucked into buildings. And that degree of pressure difference depends on things like what's the temperature outside relative to the temperature inside, or are you running your big range exhaust, exhausting air out of the house, or you're running your air handler or not running your air handler, you're getting more ventilation or less, those sorts of things. So the best way is to test over time. And that was really only possible with little passive devices that gave you an integrated average, a one number over the deployment period. Up until recently, when more sophisticated types of devices have become more affordable. They've been around for a while, but they just weren't affordable. And that's what our company does, is we have devices that not only are used by professionals, but also available to homeowners that you can monitor your radon over time.
Got it. So I don't know what regions of the United States have it easy, have a good weather year round where the windows are open, right? A lot of experts talk about just keeping your windows open more so that you have fresh air blowing in, you're not so cooped up and the same air recirculating over and over. And radon is a good example of this. If it gets in and is just recirculating, that's not a good idea. But unfortunately, in Texas, it's very hot in the summer for 3 or 4 months. You're basically cooped in because the air conditioner is going. And then in other areas like the north, east, west, just the north, you're so cold for 6, 7, 8 months of the year that you got to have the heater on, the furnace on. And so it's challenging to have the windows open as much as humans need to. And so that could add to the challenge there. But in terms of remediation, so let's say you're concerned about this and you now know that radon comes from the earth, from the ground, from the basement. What can you do in terms of remediation to your home to reduce the risk of radon coming into the home?
Well, the solution is actually fairly simple. It took a little while to figure out, but once it was figured out, it's amazingly simple. Because it's pressure related, the soil air moving into the house, you actually reverse that pressure relationship. So they do that by inserting a PVC pipe. It's usually 3 inches or 4 inches in diameter into the slab. And if there's an earth floor crawl space, they'll put a membrane down and then they'll insert the pipe underneath the membrane. But they bring it either up through a closet and through the roof, or outside the band joist at grade level, and then run the pipe up where they can draw the air out from below the building with a little inline fan. And that fan just runs all the time. And you could think, well, it's drawing the radon out and exhausting it up into the air where it can dilute, and that's true. But that suction on the space below the building is creating a lower pressure there. And so any place between the living area and the ground that you just can't seal, then the air is moving from the house down rather than from the ground in. And it's just impossible to seal a building to the soil. You need to seal up what you can, because that helps create that pressure, that low pressure field underneath the building. But it's impossible to find all the places where a gas could penetrate and come in. So that's the secret. But it's not really all that expensive in the grand scheme of things. It could cost less than $1,000 typically.
Nice.
It may be $1,500, maybe a couple thousand. If you have a big house, then perhaps it costs more. But when you think about other things we do, as far as home improvements and that sort of thing, then it's certainly reasonable.
Thank you for sharing what can be done. Will this solution then also take care of any other radioactive gases that we don't yet know about that may be harming us?
Well, interestingly enough, this has become a common system that's being installed in new buildings for vapor intrusion.
Mm.
There are so many areas where they're reclaiming property to build, say, apartments or residents on that perhaps had a factory there in the past, or a gas station with underground storage tanks, or somehow the soil is contaminated with those forever chemicals, for
Yeah.
example. And so those typically were a problem, trying to clean up those sites. Now they can put these systems in before they pour the concrete slab, and prepare to activate them with a fan,
Hmm.
and it prevents other soil gases and vapors from coming into the building.
Got it.
So
Okay, good to
it's a
know.
healthier building all the way around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so presumably, if you're trying to buy a new home build in
Mhm.
any part of the country, are developers and builders aware of the solution and are they able to put it in while they're building the house for you?
Yes and no. There are some jurisdictions where it's a requirement, but it's not everywhere. It's a lot of building codes are local,
Hmm.
so it could be a state building code. That's rare. It could be, certain parts of the state or certain counties. It depends on the state. It's becoming more prevalent that builders are putting systems in, but they're skeletal systems. So it's important for a home buyer to know that while the builder may have taken this extra precaution, they still need to test, because
Yeah.
what it's really done is made the building simpler to fix if it needs to be fixed. The
Hmm.
the, the core part of the system, that soil depressurization, is there. Perhaps they've got a stub for a pipe and they just put an inline fan in, which makes it a lot more affordable.
Yeah. I want to get to testing in a second, but I wanted to ask you one other question. Is, let's say it's seeping up from under the earth into the
Mhm.
home. Is there any floor? Let's say you have a basement, you have a main level, you have a second floor.
Mhm.
Is there any floor of the house that's safer, given that, assuming that the house is packed and the AC is going on, there's no windows open,
Mhm.
or are all rooms and all floors the same?
That's a great question. Typically, the concentrations are going to be higher on the floor closest to the soil.
Okay.
So if you have a slab house, with no basement, then that could be the main floor. Um, if it's a basement house, that lower level, a crawl space house, the floor right above the crawl space
Hmm.
would tend to be higher. As you go up, there's more air for dilution, so the concentration would become less. There are a few exceptions. There are some instances where concrete has been contaminated with uh, stone that has radium in it, and so they've actually found, for example, along the East Coast in Florida, high-rise apartments on occasion have had, elevated concentrations on upper floors.
Mm.
Uh, Fortunately, they're moderately elevated, so they can usually um, fix those with some additional ventilation that was probably needed anyway.
Hmm.
But yeah, you can find it. For example, the protocol for testing a school or a large building would be to test every ground contact apartment or room, and then 10% of any rooms or apartments above that ground contact.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, because the risk is lower, presumably, at that
Yeah.
point. Okay, so let's get on to the testing aspect of this. So you said
Mhm.
obviously the home is tested when it's sold, so when you move in, but it could have been years since you've been living at your place and you don't actually know what the radon concentrations are. The other comment you made was that radon can change day to day, week to week, season to season. So what are the best techniques? Who are the companies, who are the players in this space that are helping individuals and even professionals test, and how is EcoSense different from them all?
Well, I think there are companies that are providing digital devices that you can leave in your home. Um, there are a couple of companies now that do that in addition to us. What makes ours a little different is the sensitivity of the sensor. The others will average the concentration over a 24-hour period and give you the number, and then they'll update that average every hour. Ours actually gives a reading for what the concentration is for that hour, and then for the next hour, and then for the next hour. And then you can see, what the radon's really doing from 1 hour to the next. So you get a better picture. I'll give you an example why that's important. I talked to a homeowner out west. I think she was in Utah in the fall, and she had just turned her heat on when she got home in the evening because it was getting cool at night. And she had watched her radon monitor, that one of our monitors, that every evening the radon would go up and be elevated during the night, and then every day it would come down and remain low. And there was just a pattern to this. The EPA action level is 4 picocuries per liter. So what they say, you should take action definitely to remediate if your concentration is 4 or higher. Her concentration was just under that. And the reason I ended up taking her call after our customer support talked to her originally was because she was describing the situation. I said, this is a good example of why our monitors are important. Every day at that time of year, she would go to work and she had her furnace on setback, so it didn't run. And then every evening when she got home, the temperature had cooled down and the system would run. And in her, it was a townhome, I believe, and the furnace was in the lowest level, and the return plenum was leaking, so it would suck air into the return, that comes back to the furnace from that surrounding area, which was, she had a living space and a workout area there. And so because it was exhausting air from that surrounding space into that return plenum and taking it up, it was drawing more soil air in when the furnace was on. So the radon would go up. So every night it was up close to 8 picocuries per liter, 7s. And then every day it would go down to almost, to less than 2. So if the air handler was running, it really mined the radon. So having the ability to look at it gives you a better idea of what kind of building operation or lifestyle, different things are going on that impact the radon entry and therefore the concentration. So then you can be more informed about, well, what should you really do about it? Do you need to get a full mitigation system, or is it just, something you could control, or even people finding out that, their concentrations are less than that action level, but they're elevated enough that they're concerned, because EPA says even lowering concentrations of less than 4 picocuries per liter provide benefit for the reducing the risk of lung cancer, which actually is something they studied recently. They've been doing tests or studies to that have indicated a connection to stroke. And one of the more recent studies on that suggested that vascular disease caused by stroke could be reduced if we actually lowered the action level, and people were taking action to reduce exposure to concentrations of even less than 4 picocuries per liter.
Interesting. Okay, wow. This is intriguing conversation, interesting conversation, and I think it sheds light on an area that we haven't delved into at all. And I think for folks that are listening and are concerned, how should they think about it? So you're saying that a device that's constantly testing, averaging to the hour every hour, is
Mhm.
your best bet, or is a better bet than others in helping, helping you understand where you're at and then building a mitigation plan based on what that data is telling you. Are these devices small, tiny? Do they just sit on the floor of the basement and they're monitoring it all day and you can kind of review there's either a sensor on the app or there's an
Mhm.
iPhone app or something you can kind of look at? How does it work?
They're small. It's recommended you get them at least 20 inches off the floor. You would like to be in the breathing zone rather than right, on the floor where perhaps you're on top of an entry point.
Yeah.
Um, and recognizing that children are susceptible also. And there are a couple of options. For example, we have a device that we call it the Eco Cube. It's a little cube that's about 2 inches by 2 inches by 2 inches, and you connect it to your Wi-Fi, and then you have a phone app. And the phone app allows you to see what's going on from 1 hour to the next, and you can actually see the trend charts, and then you can select to see the average for the day or the week or the month or the year to date, and just see how it's moving. So if you watched it for a month or two, you'd have a good idea of what's going on. But one of the things about real estate tests, let's say you buy a house in a mild time of year like spring or fall, and you don't have your heat on, or the heat's not on, or the air conditioning's not on, and it's mild, it may look good for the 2 or 3 days that you test, and then winter rolls around, and it could be entirely different. So that's why it's really good. Even if you've had a test when you bought your home, it's it's fallacy to think that, oh, it tested good then, so I'm good to roll. And I talk to people all the time. Yeah, I tested my house, 10 years ago when I bought it. I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I know there's many things that people have to kind of consider in their
Yeah.
health journey. And this is one more that you should think about and look at. And I know it can be challenging because there's so many options and so many things to do, but it's interesting data on what you're saying is this being the second largest cause of lung cancer in the United States, which is significant, and then also it being linked to stroke. So obviously you sell consumer devices on with EcoSense and on your website. Where can people find this? Where can they get more information or learn about EcoSense?
If you go to ecosense.io, not .com, .io, we have products there for professionals, but we have a line of products for consumers. We have one that doesn't connect to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. If you just want to see what the concentrations are on a display, you can do that, and it has a little button you can press and see what the average is for the hour, and press it again. It'll show you the day and then the week and the month. So it doesn't give you the chart, and you can't get a history from it, but it's easy to use and operate, and it's right there where you can keep an eye on it. And then we have the one I described that works with Wi-Fi and the phone app. And so I invite you to go there. We have a Radon free campaign. There are two radon induced lung cancer survivors that we're working with. You can go there and read their stories, and one of them, Bill from Utah, lives in Park City. He actually moved there because he's an athlete and skier and loved to be outdoors. And he's a pretty young fella. He's in his 40s, I think, and he ended up with stage 4 lung cancer, trying to figure out why he was having trouble breathing, and developed a cough. When you see that happen to a young, athletic, vibrant man, you realize that Well, if you have lungs, you're susceptible if you're being exposed. And so he's made it a mission to try to spread the word, and so we're helping him with devices out for people who can't afford them. So if you buy one with the link there, then we're contributing to devices for those who can't afford to get them. They're inexpensive. We've got devices for as little as $129 that you can, and $150,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So they're
Okay.
they're quite affordable.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. So there you have it, folks. EcoSense.io. Dallas, thanks for coming on the Anti-Aging Hack Show.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.